All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Another Wednesday live stream. This week I've been mostly focusing on Shift. Last week, if you joined up on the live streams, you probably saw where I upgraded this Project X. It's a real world application. I just kind of anonymized it, but this Project X was upgraded from Laravel 7 to Laravel 11. And that allows me to kind of dog food Shift and look at things as a user. I normally do a decent job of thinking about that, but when you use your own stuff, when you dog food, you really eat your own dog food, you really kind of see things. It forces you to really wear that hat and get in the context of the service. And there's two things, and I think this little comment here kind of exemplifies that. So first of all, as a user, when I saw this comment, it's like, okay, that's a lot of methods that could I could use. I got to go search my whole code base for that to kind of get more context of where I'm using this. How many places am I using this? Should I just downgrade? So first, what would be nice here is to have a list of files. And Shift does this for a lot of other comments. Now, I know the reason I didn't do it for this comment is because it was added after the fact. This was brought to my attention by a few people that emailed, support and said, hey, upgrade went well, but there were a couple small, carbon methods I had to change. The second kind of reason I didn't do it is I was worried this would be a very long file list. If you're using the diff-in functions, you're probably using those in several views or controllers or whatever. And I just thought it would be a little bit noisy. That's why I didn't make the file list in the first place. But taking it a step farther than that, something I've always wanted to do with Shift, and honestly, I don't know why I thought this would be so hard, but recently, again, dogfooding this, it's like, I just need to do this. It's funny, I think Adam Wathan kind of first pushed me to the file list way back, but moving beyond the file list, I know we may have talked about it, but even back then, 3-4 years ago, he had said, you should link to the file. It'd be cool if you could link to the file so you could see exactly the line that changed and all this stuff and get a feel for okay, should I just downgrade to Carbon 2 or should I, go fix these? So again, from a context of a user going through this PR, if I only see 3 files here that I need to change, okay, well, I can manage that. If I see 25 listed out, maybe I just am going to downgrade to Carbon 2 for now. So 2 things we're going to do. First, we're going to add the list to this comment of files that need to be reviewed, files where these methods were found. And then second, I would like that to be a file list, a clickable thing that goes to a PR diff and shows you these files. I think that would be pretty cool. So let's go do that, right? That's what we're going to work on today with Shift. Hey Samuel, how's it going? I made sure everything was pulled down. Let's open up PHP Storm. And, I may or may not run this. We might just kind of hack around the code for 15, 20 minutes. Running this and in the background and closing the PR and pulling stuff back up, it takes a bit of time. So let's focus on the code. I can always run this and put a screenshot of the update in Twitter. So let's jump down to Shift and let's find this carbon. Let me find this carbon bit. So where is it? I think carbon 3, maybe I called it, Carbon 2, Laravel Carbon. Maybe I didn't call it Carbon. What did I call it? Let's open up the Laravel 11 Shift and let's go see what I called it. It's probably down here towards the bottom. Is it in miscellaneous? That's strange. Maybe it is. Carbon. It is. There's not much here, actually, in fairness. Okay, so let's kind of take a look at what a method like this does. Again, added after the fact, I can tell because I threw it in miscellaneous. It doesn't have its own dedicated task. And it's because, again, it's just looking for kind of generic files or generic matches. So what it does is it searches find files matching. So that there's already a couple problems here. I filter a PHP extension. Why do I not just, well, we'll come back to that. I'm not sure why I don't just say find PHP files matching, but there's probably a reason for that. So I'm not gonna change that at the moment. So what we're doing is we're looking for any of those things, just a regex. We're just looking for anywhere we might find that, and then we're also gonna filter it on this diff in, and we search for diff, float diff, in real, a nice little regular expression here that just is all the different diff methods you could be using inside of Carbon potentially. And if it finds those or it's not equal to false, then that's what it's going to filter out. So we have removed and changed. We merge those together. So long as it found some things, we now have a path of these. Now, I can fix this comment simply by just saying paths. That's the first issue. Very simple fixed. I just throw paths in there, and now it's going to list out the unique file paths that have matches that do that. But what would be really cool is to take this a step farther and, again, not just have the paths there, but have them linked. And potentially even with their line numbers. That would be really cool. So to do that, I think I'm going to need to create kind of a new thing here. So let's go take a look at how I create warning comments. Okay, so when I create comments, I basically just call a constructor of an array of references. I'm still fine to pass an array, but kind of what I would like to do now is pre-build. I want to pre-build like a file list, or like, you know, linked files or something. I wonder what I want to call that. I'm not going to get too hung up on it, but here, let's just kind of start pseudocoding out. So what I would want to do in these cases is basically craft a file list with all the places that it found this thing. So the simplest thing to do, I think, would basically be to loop over paths, map them into a new, you know, file link object. I don't really want to call it file link, but again, we can fix that. And then pass that to comment. And then the to-do would be like comment needs to handle type of file link, right? We need to properly output that. So that's to-do off to the other side. So I think this is kind of what needs to happen. So let's make this like file link or file list, or I don't just want to call it file because that's pretty generic. File reference. Yeah, I think file reference is a good start. If we look, I actually call that references. So I think file reference is a decent start. So let's do that. I have a little like models folder over here. Let me close the chat. I have a little models folder over here in source, I think. Yeah, models. I got all sorts of stuff in here. Comment, I already have file, of course. So I think let's call this file reference. So I'm just gonna make a new PHP file, and we'll just say file reference. All right, and pretty simply, we'll just say namespace, shift models, I think is correct. We'll say class file reference, and that's pretty much it for now. What would be nice is to just, instead of loop over them, just pass it in a file reference, and it does the right thing, right? I think that would be the thing to do. So I think let's just like write the code that we want, right? So we'll say file reference, and then we could say something like from paths or something, from paths, and we'll pass it paths. There you go. And we really don't need to do any of this anymore. So let's just make this the magic method that does all that stuff. So we'll do that, and we'll pass it back an array. And here we'll do this loop. So we'll basically say this needs to be an array, and we'll simply just say, we could just map it all here, right? So we would return array map. The callback would basically be fn path is new self path and paths. Simple as that. So we'll map them into that, and we're going to pass that to comment now. Oh, whoops, I need to call that paths. That helps. All right, cool. Oh, arrow. Forgot my little arrow function there. And not self paths. There we go. So we don't have self, so let's generate, that's interesting. Let's generate a new constructor, and we'll say this is a string path, and let's initialize that property. Cool. And yeah, simple as that. Okay, cool. And we'll leave the, you may want to new this up yourself, so we'll just leave that constructor. Now, I could collapse that into like property promotion and all that fancy stuff. But I think, I know that there's going to be some more work on how this potentially gets set here in a bit. So I'm just gonna leave the raw constructor there for now. I'm not going to try to streamline that, because I guess what I'm thinking about is it'd be very cool if I had like int line, right? If I had the line number, I can link not only to the file, but to the exact line in which, that needs to take place. So I'm not going to have that right now, but I want to do that. So that's just kind of where my thought process is on leaving the raw constructor. Okay, so that's from paths, and now we're going to take this away. Now we could just do that. It's an array. All the type hints should be good there. Now it's just a matter of when I'm outputting that comment, I need to reference the proper path depending on GitHub, Bitbucket, whatever, because they're all a little bit different. So let's go toy around with that for a minute. I think there's some kind of, what do they call it? There's some polymorphism that's kind of happening here. So first of all, let's clean up these methods. I'd like to add comment as the function's return type. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Well, you know what? Let's just fix all these. Let's just fix all these. So we'll say the content is a string. The reference should be an array, and it's going to return self. I'm fine with that. Okay, so we fixed all those. Arrays still coming in. There really should be no changes on this. Looks like there's some opportunities for like enums here. But let's move on down to comment presenter. So there's this comment presenter. It's going to get a comment, and this is the one that kind of outputs the markdown that you see ultimately in the PR comment. So it gives us this little warning. It does all the line breaks. It makes sure that stuff's marked down, the links and so forth. It might pre-generate some references. So this is all kind of where things happen here. So let's go ahead and fill out some return types here. So I think this is all just string. Yep, all just strings. Present comment. This is probably the one we care about. Everything returns a string. Okay, so get references for comment. Comment references. Okay, this is the one that's going to end up returning an array. So again, let's finish type hinting out all this stuff. Set content void. This should be a string. I just think there's an opportunity here to get all this lined up the way we want. What is this? Oh, look, I already have some kind of file references here. That's interesting. Public statics function. Where do I use this? Curious. Array. This returns a string. Let's finish what we're doing here. Self. Okay, so we did the rest. We just didn't go all the way down. Where is file references used? I just want to see this. Oh, the config files, of course. Okay. So I'm already kind of doing something like this where I blob those out, or I make a reference. So I might actually borrow this because this is kind of, this blob, this kind of format is what we're actually going to need to output those types of things. Okay, so that's interesting. File references works like that. Okay, so we have get references. That just returns an array. Again, I'm really just checking the types because there's no shape to this array. It can be an array of strings, or now it can be an array of file references. It's all good. Okay, so it does references for comments. Get references. If it's empty, then just return nothing. If it's not empty, then it gets the references. It sorts them. That's interesting to me. And then it implodes them based on their markdown. It's interesting that I do a raw new line there, but that's okay. Okay, so it gives us a task list. If this is where, like, if you're on GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever, it would change that. Sorts the references. Why do I sort references? I guess just so they're in alphabetical order. That's all fine. That should be fine. Probably should nat sort those, just thinking out loud, but not a big deal. Okay, so references for comment gets called here. This is all public. Do I call this anywhere else? I do not. I'm tempted to make that private, just to, again, limit the what I touch here. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this private. All right, cool. Let's do that. I'll fix the test later. We'll get a failing test since we don't do that. Cool. Okay, so really it's present comment that matters. So present comment, if it's empty, then it's just, here's your comment. Otherwise, output these with the references down at the bottom. So the real formatting of the references comes from here, right? And this is all based on use task lists. And right now, I simply just implode them because the assumption is they're already pre-built strings. That's where we're going to need to change it. So this is what we need to change. The references are fine on get references, but we can't just blindly call sort on them. We would have to see, we have to look at the shape of the array. And if the shape of the array or an instance of the first item in the array is a file reference, then we're going to need to treat it a little bit differently. So here's what we can do. We can say if references 0 is instance of file reference, then we want to do our new thing. So like this, I don't know, output file references. Again, not the biggest fan of these, and we'll pass it in references. All right, so now we know we can loop over that. It's going to return. It kind of branches off to a different logic. And, maybe I want to loop over them and make sure they all are. I could use the little collection method for that. But the likelihood that I have a mix and match of file references and strings is just not, I just wouldn't do it that way. So we can trust the shape for now. Maybe I make a top level object. I don't think there's a need for that. I think keeping everything an array and just changing the shape is totally fine. Let's go ahead and add this method. We'll finish out our output. This is where it's kind of like, I think there's an opportunity to probably condense this, but this is kind of like this. It's really this, right? Now the catch is this is where we need to be polymorphic, because it's not as simple as just returning that. So if we go down to comment presenters, I'm pretty sure when we make, I thought that there were other things that reference this. I thought we had like a GitHub comment presenter. Yeah, here we go. Oh, okay, it just returns true or false depending on who you are. So it's not polymorphic necessarily. The client's polymorphic, but the presenter gets built out a certain way. That's a little bit ugly. That's not ideal. Not ideal. Okay. Let's back up a second. Let's back up a second. Let's say I wanted to look at a file diff related to this. What does this URL look like? So there's some things that happen here. If you really want to pick this commit and have the reference to it, the example here is like pull for commits, the commit SHA, and then theoretically the file name after it with the diff. That's deep. I don't think I want to look at it. Actually, I don't want to look at it in the context of a diff. I want to look at it in the context of the file at this point in time. That's what I want. I want to demonstrate that, like, if I'm trying to link to line 6, here you go, this would be like a full reference to it. I don't want to look at it in the context of the PR per se. I want to look at it in the context of the parent commit. Here's why. First of all, the diff's noisy. I don't want to see a bunch of red and everything else. I just want to focus in on the line number. So that's first and foremost. I just want to, if I can, do the line number right here and highlight it this way, that's the focus, right? Here's theoretically the line, which brings me to the next point, theoretically the line. If I link to this at the end of the pull request, there's possible that Shift has made other changes in later commits or performed some reformatting or whatever, where that line number doesn't match up anymore. So I have to take a snapshot, if you will, or in this case, a commit, the parent commit, of when this comment was created. So in the process of making the PR and committing files, the comment is left at that point in time of a particular commit. And again, that's why we would want to reference it not in the context of the full PR or a diff, but independently at that point in time, meaning at that commit. So this is the right bit here for GitHub. So let's go back. I'm not going to worry about the polymorphic stuff right now. What we're really after here is something like this, right? So we need some things in here right now that the comment doesn't have. So this is kind of the next hurdle. Again, this is kind of why this change felt really hard in the beginning, because it's like I didn't have all this comment presenters and all these different things. It was one of those scenarios where to track that seemed a little crazy, but I've kind of built some of those pieces over the years now. So now that these pieces are in place, I just kind of got to find them and stitch them together. So it's still a little, on the outside, it probably feels a little bit crazy, but it's, all the pieces are here to put together. So let's just write the code, go back to writing the code for what this would need to look like. We basically would loop over the reference as reference, and what we would need to do, and again, this is going to be based on Bitbucket, GitLab, GitHub, but right now let's just build it for GitHub because the rest of it's easy. And what we would do is much like what we do here. We would just pop this out, and again, we don't have line numbers or anything right now, but this potentially changes. So we would basically say, we would turn this into, lines or something like that, we could say. What do I call it in the other one? Or it doesn't matter. Again, we can clean this up later. And this could all be done in like an array map or whatever. But the point is that we would ultimately return lines. And here's where things get a little trickier. So let's borrow all this. I'm going to leave off that hash line number for now, but we can see that it would be very easy if we started tracking line numbers to just change this link and append that if a line number were present in our reference. So let's change this. We have the %. We want to take this now, and what we need to do is this will end up getting changed to %s. That's going to be the project, and then this will get changed to %s. That'll be the commit. And then this part gets changed to the actual path, right? So we say %s here. And now we need to go so far. Let's just break this up so we can kind of see what's going on. Now we need to go so far as to kind of list these out. And again, we may not have all these right now. So this is going to be reference path, right? We're gonna grab that out. So let's add that. And then we need the project. We're gonna have to find that, or repo is probably the thing to say. So we'll say repository, and we'll say commit SHA, I think I call that. And then again, we'll do reference path. Now if we go, oops, I keep doing that. If we go back to, now we don't have these for a second, so for now, I'm just going to hard code these to be, something. So again, I'm not too worried if we link this perfectly, but for the purposes of a quick demo, maybe here in a second, let's see if I can do this. Or well, I won't be able to demo it, but just so I know what these are, let's just say Project X. I'm on the iMac, so I'm not going to be able to pull it out that way. All right, let's go back to our file reference, and we need to have another, public function path returns a string, and that would give us return this path, right? Let's format all that. That's ugly. Okay, cool. So now we're pulling out path. We just use path twice. It's a reference in the file name, but also in the link on GitHub. So it's pretty straightforward. Again, the question would be, I think it's worth just diving down the rabbit hole for a few more minutes. I think the question would be, how can I get this commit SHA? I know I have it. And more importantly, how do I get the project? I think the GitHub, yes, there we go. The client has access to the project. So there we go. So I could pass it down into the comment presenter so it has a reference to the project. Good. That's a good start. There's somewhere else in the whole thing. I do something with like commit hash. Let me see if I can find this real quick. I definitely have stuff in the code that does something with like the commit. Yeah, these things. How do I re-inject that? I think this is in the utility. Yeah, here we go. Update comments with commit reference. Beautiful. This is what we want. This is what we want. Okay, what happens, let's find the reference to this method. What happens is when Shift has its own little internal facade, it's the Shift class, and think of it like Carbon. It has like hundreds of helpful methods inside of it. Some might call it a God class, but it just makes sense. All the utility things that Shift does are just helpfully in this single facade class, where I can say things like Shift : commit, right? Shift : add comment, as we've seen. It's just all the underlying stuff. The point here is that when I call Shift commit, it runs the command for the commit, and then it takes the commit SHA that it makes, which ultimately gets pushed up to the PR, and updates the comments that were left to have access to that committed snapshot. Right now, it just loops over the content comments and replaces anywhere in them where they have a commit reference to that particular bit. Now, it just does it in the content. That's okay for now, but this is the area where I could now get access to the commit. So, again, it only does stuff in the comment or the content now. It always felt a little bit weird to me that it always felt a little bit weird to me that this string replacement happened here and not in the presenter. So what I'm wondering is maybe potentially better is that what this does is loop over the comments that have been left since the last commit and basically do something more akin to like, set commit reference, right? And instead they take that SHA-1. And now the comment has an access to that. And when Humpty Dumpty is getting put back together again in the comment presenter, I have access to it instead of like pre-replacing it here. I think that's probably a better design, and it's going to give me access to do these kind of things there. And then I basically just say, hey, when I'm presenting the comment, if commit reference is not null, then start replacing it, in all the things, right? So when I output the references, I replace it. When I output the content, I replace it. And it happens there with this logic about how it should be output instead of all these other places. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that I'm doing it that way. And I even do, look at this hash commit colon. I wonder if this is replaced in the presenter. Yeah, see, the Bitbucket clients do stuff here already. So yeah, that's kind of funky. It shouldn't do that. It should probably happen. Yeah. It should probably happen elsewhere. Where's comment? So comment's just raw at this point, I think, instead of, so build main, yeah. So comment presenter, comment. So each time it loops over a comment, it calls the presenter to dump out the comment, but then it goes even farther to replace stuff here. And I see why it's doing it here, because again, this is where it needs access to vendor, project, commits, SHA, all that stuff. So I'll probably stop the stream here because I think there's opportunity to do some refactoring and make sure that all of this string replacement is getting output instead in the presenter. Instead of having the client do a little bit and have the utility helper do a little bit and have the file reference do a little bit, go back to treating those objects as data references in the case of file reference and comment. They're just DTOs. They're kind of just dumb objects that hold data. And the utility class and the client should really just be delegators. They're delegating project information. They're delegating commit information as the shift is running. And the presenter should be doing all of the replacement to ultimately just give you a string to pass down to, GitHub, Bitbucket, whatever, to add it to the comment, which it's doing. But I think, again, that's why this felt hard in the beginning, is because there were a lot of pieces, a lot of different places. And this is programming, right? This is programming at its finest. This is a scenario where you have code and it felt a little unmanageable, and you go in to kind of make a change, and you start making the change easier by doing a little bit of refactoring and a little bit of future proofing. Again, I don't want to go too far down that road, but I think I think we've revealed a few design inconsistencies here where it would just be easier to give the comment the data and go back to letting the presenter do the stuff, right? I think that's the thing to do. That refactor would probably take a good hour or two to kind of move these to the right spots. And again, this is critical to Shift. This is how it leaves its comments. So I want to make sure that I slow down, write the tests, and make sure this is all working, and kind of run it myself in a independent worker, to make sure it feels good. It'll be pretty obvious if it's messed up, so I'm not too worried about breaking something per se, but I just want to make sure I slow down and get it right. So I think we've hacked together what I wanted. This will ultimately allow you to now have file paths, and again, I only need to use it on this one very small comment for now. I don't have to use it everywhere, but if that ends up looking good and working, maybe even with line numbers, then I can go back to all comments that are left with file references and really just call this single file reference that we did down here in miscellaneous. So down here in Carbon, I can just change that to be file reference from paths, and it'll just work, right? It'll just give me file references that are clickable to the paths. The line numbers will take a little bit of work, but again, I can iterate now. So I think we've proven that this works. It's very streamlined top level. It's very streamlined from an object level. I think those old school places where I was doing some stuff that should have been in the presenter for convenience, I was doing it here. I think it's time to refactor that back into the presenter, add the tests, and make sure all that wiring is correct. So, because this is used in a lot of places, so I don't want to go breaking that just yet. So I'm gonna slow down, drive this out with tests, and make sure that the commit reference doesn't get lost. And I'll do the same with the adding comments for the individual clients. Make sure those go back to using the comment presenter as well. So, awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining live. I will see you next week.